Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sake Revolution. This is America's first, and I'm pretty sure only, at this point, sake podcast. I am one of your hosts, John Puma, from the Sake Notes, also the administrator at the Internet Sake Discord, your home for sake shenanigans on the Internet.
And I'm your host, Timothy Sullivan. I'm a sake samurai, sake educator, as well as the founder of the Urban Sake website. And every week, John and I will be here tasting and chatting about all things sake and doing our best to make it fun and easy to understand.
Mm-hmm. That is absolutely right.
Yeah.
Tim,
how you doing?
So I'm doing good. I'm ready to face the week. It's a spoiler alert, guys. Right now it is a Sunday night. We're recording this and just getting hyped up. I don't know if anybody else does that when they're going into work week, but I'm trying to feel myself a little bit. Right. How about you?
Well, not getting hyped up. I have jury duty coming up, so.
Oh no. Oh, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you really want to, do your part in contributing to the justice system, in which case, bravo.
Yeah, I feel it's my civic duty, so I'm going to do it. I delayed a couple times, but no more. So here we go.
Excellent, excellent.
It makes me want to throw caution to the wind.
Oh my.
And enjoy my Sunday night.
Okay, and what do we have in store for us tonight? This is going to be a doozy.
Well, we have a new series of episodes coming out. Wouldn't you know it? The never-ending series of series, but...
Tim, I love series. We talked about this at the end of last year, that one of my favorite things that we did on the show in 2021 was our series and getting new series rolled out. So I'm glad we have yet another. The naming on this one is really going to be fun.
Yes.
So why don't you tell the people at home what we're doing?
The series we're going to embark on this week is Extreme Sake.
Oh, Tim, the 90s called, and they want their nomenclature back.
We're going to do a series on extreme sake brews. And this means sake that has extremely high alcohol, extremely low alcohol, extremely low rice milling, extremely robust rice milling, low acidity, high acidity. You get the picture?
I think so. Really quickly, for like the avoidance of doubt, is this X-stream or is it like EXTREME?
We're going to spell it in the most extreme way we can. Well, all capitals, of course. I know that.
Oh, all right. All capitals. It's going to look like a Red Bull can. Yes. Oh, it's all done. Okay.
The branding is going to be like, what's that energy drink? Monster energy drink? That's what the branding's going to be like that.
Okay. All right. So we're going to borrow for a little bit from Red Bull, Mountain Dew, Monster. I got you.
Yeah. So the topic that we're going to tackle with our first extreme sake situation is going to be extremely minimal rice milling.
Okay.
Now, normally, sake rice is milled or polished before you brew your sake, right? That's pretty basic.
Most of the time,
a lot of people understand that. And the average rice milling is probably below 70% remaining to about 60% remaining. Like that is the zone for most premium sake.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to get something very much outside of that zone today.
Outside of that zone.
Yes.
Now, when a brewery is traversing this unknown territory or less worn territory, is it usually like they've got a plan, they know what they want to do, or is it like experimental and they want to see what happens?
Well, I would say most breweries, if they're going to do something extreme, they have a very set plan. Let's talk about rice milling for a second. If you're going to make a sake that has a very, very super fine rice milling, let's say 5% remaining or something super extreme like that, that is such an expensive proposition. You're not going to do that on a whim, I don't think. That would be a plan.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're making something that has a very robust or very unpolished rice, that's also super unusual. And I think that's got to have a plan behind it as well.
Mm-mm-mm.
Yeah.
All right. That's just extremes.
Yeah, extremes. So are you excited to try a sake that has very, very minimal polishing?
I think this will definitely qualify as getting outside of my comfort zone.
Okay.
And here, when you said that our episode was going to be extreme sake, I thought we were going to sip sake and listen to more than words. So this is very surprising.
All right. So before we taste anything and talk about the brewery or talk about the specific sake, when we mill the rice, what are we trying to accomplish? What are we getting rid of when we polish the rice down to a smaller size?
When we're polishing out the rice, we're trying to get rid of that extraneous proteins and get to the starchy core, the shimpaku of the rice. And I'm going to say that 90%, you're kind of just dusting it off a little bit. There's not a lot of, you're probably taking off that outer shell of the rice, that outer bit, but probably not a whole lot more, right, Tim? So it'd be a lot of proteins left over.
Right. So the outer layers contain the fats and the proteins, and normally those things get polished away. And as you just mentioned, the sake we're tasting today is polished to 90% remaining. That is the same as eating rice. So when you have white rice from the grocery store, they polish about 10% away, 90% remaining. So what do you think the flavor implications of that are when you have more fats and proteins in the mix with all that starch?
I'm guessing I'm going to be tasting something very rice forward.
You got it. That is right. Yeah, those fats and proteins actually give rice its flavor. You know, they give that ricey flavor we know on our palates. So that's one thing I'm going to look at for sure.
So more rice equals rice forward. Who knew?
Who knew? We got to talk about this brewery that's making this super extreme sake. This is Terada Honke Sake Brewery out of Chiba Prefecture. And they are very well known for making low intervention sake.
Low intervention sake?
Yes.
Huh. Is that anything like natural wine? Like, what are we talking about here?
Yes. There's many, when I was researching this brand, many natural wine stores all over the country carry sakes from Terada Honke because they have this low intervention ideology about their sake. So, low intervention, what does that mean? Well, it means that they take a very traditional approach to their production. They have extended use of the kimoto yeast starter method, and they also do very minimal rice polishing. And this sake we're tasting today is milled to 90%, so very minimal involvement there.
Yeah.
And they don't add any alcohol to their sakes at all, so it's 100% junmai sake. And this is also unpasteurized, undiluted with water, and no charcoal filtering. And on top of that, there's more. They also use 100% organic rice, and they also have their own in-house yeast, so ambient yeast, and they also make their own koji spores. So that is extremely unusual. Most other breweries are going to purchase koji mold spores to make their rice koji. They're going to purchase it from a supplier, and there's major suppliers in Japan. But this brewery propagates their own mold.
Huh. So they are really kicking it old school.
Yes, they are kicking it old school. So the label for the sake we're going to taste, which we'll introduce in just a second, it says this is similar to a taste you may have experienced 100 years ago.
So old school for certain.
All right. Do you want to walk us through the stats for this extreme sake? Extreme.
Absolutely, Tim. All right, so our very extreme Terada Honke low intervention sake is the Terada Honke Gatori 90 90, I imagine, is referring to that polishing ratio. Kimoto. Oh, my goodness. Junmai Nama Genshu Sake. Wow. Okay. This is a lot. This is going to be a lot. The rice type is Koshi Hikari. And as mentioned several times, 90%. Speaking of extreme, the alcohol percentage is 20.5. Tim, what are you doing here? The sake meter value is a +5. That's not very extreme. The acidity is 3.5.
Extreme. Although this,
oh my goodness, everything in this sake is extreme.
Yeah, this is not our extreme acidity episode, but the acidity is pretty high as well.
It might as well be. My goodness.
Yeah. So of all those things you mentioned, I want to call your attention to the rice type as well. So you said it's Koshi Hikari. That's eating rice.
That does not surprise me at all.
So this is not a special designation sake rice. This is an eating rice that you can, it's a high quality, expensive type of eating rice, but they grow organic Koshi Hikari. So it's amazing.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Now, the owner and the master brewer of Terada Honke is Mr. Masaru Terada. He's the 24th generation president. And this brewery started in 1673. And they've been making sake for 349 years.
I always love it when we have like something with some kind of ridiculous history to it. Yeah. That's lovely.
So they know medieval sake because they were actually around.
They were there. They've got notes.
Yes. And I read an interesting story on their website. They have a great website, which we'll link to in the show notes. And Terada-san wrote this very beautiful kind of essay about his views on fermentation. And he felt that when he first took over the brewery, when his father-in-law was the previous president, and he married the daughter of the brewery, and when he took over, he wanted to clean things up and make it very antiseptic and a little bit more hospital-like, and the sake wasn't coming out the way they wanted, and he really engaged with what fermentation is and how fermentation is an ongoing process. It's an alive process, and he really arrived at a point where he said, I'm going to embrace everything about fermentation. And this brought them to a point where fermentation is coming first, and how fermentation is an ongoing, evolving process. And this led them to use airborne yeast and propagate their own koji and arrive at a point where they're doing this extremely low intervention style of completely natural sake. So it was a process for him to discover this path, and he even ties his own health into it, where he discovered how fermentation can influence your own bodily health. And it was really interesting. So we'll link to that information if you want to learn more about this brewer and about kind of the background of how this brewery adopted this really interesting and really old school style of brewing.
Okay. That's going to be interesting, I think.
Yeah. So I don't think I can wait any longer.
No, let's do this. Let's get extreme, Tim.
Okay.
Whoa. That was when I popped mine, there was some resistance. Whoa.
All right. What are we seeing in the glass?
Well, the first thing I'm noticing, Tim, is that this sake is quite not clear.
Yeah, it has some golden haze to it.
Yeah, very much so.
It's transparent, but it's not clear in color. It's a yellowish straw color. All right, let's give it a smell. I think the aroma is a little more delicate than I would have imagined, but it is rice forward for sure.
definitely rice forward. Got a lot of rice and that sweetness that you talked about earlier.
When you take, if you were to take raw rice, whole grain rice, and soak it in water for overnight, and then give that a smell, it's kind of like this. That's the aroma I'm getting. It smells like rice that's been soaked in water. Sprouting rice kind of aroma.
Sprouting rice.
Yeah, very kind of grain forward, ricey in aroma.
Yeah.
Complex too.
Grain is,
yeah.
That's the word I'm trying to, I'm not used to getting the aroma of grain on sake, ever. It's very, very different.
And I mean, the other kind of thing that pops to my mind, again, just smelling this sake, is the word umami. Like I'm getting kind of hints of savoriness, not necessarily soy sauce or anything like that, but just hints around the edges of this like kind of more umami driven aroma, savoriness, and that grain, rice forward and robust rice aroma.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
All right, let's give it a taste.
Yes.
Whoa.
Wow. Tim, this is a little extreme.
This is extreme.
This is really, this is interesting. And like, I hate to put it this way, but I want to say I like this more than I expected to. I was very trepidatious going in, Tim.
Yes.
I had concerns.
Yes. Well, for me, sipping on the sake, the first thing that jumps out to me is the acidity. I mean, there's a sharpness, especially more towards the finish of the sake, that really brings out the acidity. Yes. So that comes across loud and clear. And the flavor is very rice focused and kind of has a savory overall complexion to it. So if you think about soy sauce, miso, mushroom kind of flavors, that it hints in that direction of having that umami kind of edge to it, but very rice driven. And the finish comes off as dry for me. Like there's not a lot of lingering funkiness on the palate. The finish is for how funky the sake really is. The finish is relatively dry, which is interesting to me.
I agree. It's not cloying. Usually when you have something that's this big, it lingers. And here it is kind of dropping off when it's done. It's doing its thing, it's doing its business, and it's moving on.
I think we should also mention that we're both drinking this sake chilled to like a white wine.
We are,
to like a white wine temperature. So I have a feeling, I have a sneaking sake suspicion. My sake spidey senses are telling me that if this warms up to room temperature or even more, it's going to bring out a whole different side of this sake. So we can continue to sip on this as we chat about extreme sake and see how it changes. But I think we're getting it in its chilled state, kind of a little bit tighter. And I think that as it warms up, the savoriness and the richness is going to blossom a little bit more. And again, playing with temperature is one of the fun things about sake. You got to love it.
It does lend itself to the idea of letting it warm up a little bit. That feels right to me when I take a sniff at this and a sip. Yeah.
The other thing I'll comment on, just having had a couple sips, is that I also feel the full presence of the 20.5% alcohol, which is also extreme. So that is also, there's a lot of extreme. This sake has extreme edges all over the place.
It has extreme edges?
Yes.
This qualifies for your for the Extreme Sake Award. So where does extreme sake cross paths with crazy style?
I think they're very closely related.
Okay. That makes sense. I can see that.
Do you think my Shell, lover of crazy style, would enjoy this sake?
I think that she would enjoy this a good deal. We'll find out in a little bit. When I told her that we were sipping something that was only milled to 90% tonight, and the first thing out of her mouth was, "Save some for me." And so I think she definitely wants to see how this goes.
Well, I do want to tell you one other thing. This brewery, believe it or not, Terada Honke, they make a sake that is even more extreme than this.
Tim, what is more extreme than 20% alcohol, 90% milled sake, and all of that acidity?
Try no milling. They have a sake made with brown rice.
Wow.
Extreme.
That is, I just imagine like them being like, "What, you don't think we'll do it? Come on, we'll do it." Like it's a dare. Like,
yeah.
That's kind of amazing.
Yes. So I believe they have this unmilled sake. They actually sprout the grains. So that's what you actually do in beer. When you have barley and you're making beer, we don't polish the barley and put koji on it. And no, what they do is they sprout the grains when you're making beer. That's called malting in the world of beer. And when you sprout the grains, it becomes malt, and then the grain itself produces enzymes that break down starch into sugar. So in the world of beer, that's how we get the sugars out of the grain. But in sake, we almost always polish the rice. So we can't sprout it to get the enzymes. We put the koji on it, and we use the koji to get enzymes to break down starch into sugar. But this other sake made by Terada Honke, they actually take what would be the beer approach, which is where they get a whole grain of rice and then they sprout that grain to get enzymes. It's really super funky. But we couldn't get our hands on that sake. So we wanted to feature something that was available to consumers in the US. So this Katori 90 Namagenshu is imported and available. Anyone who's interested can get this sake, and it's about just around $30.
I love how we couldn't get the sake that's completely unmilled.
Yes.
So we had to settle for 90% milled. Or 90% unmilled. I think at that point it just makes more sense to say unmilled.
Unmilled, yes. So but for me, I don't know about how you feel, John, but for me, this is plenty extreme to kick off our series.
Extreme enough for me. Yes. I'm very pleased with this today.
Now, I have to ask you, tasting this super extreme sake, where does this fit in your game plan for enjoying sake? Is this something you get out of your sake fridge when your natural wine-loving friends come over? Or is this something you're going to enjoy with your funkiest meals? Or how do you think you would implement a sake like this in your life?
This is a tough one, Tim.
Yeah.
This is a very kind of a new style of sake for me. So I'm not sure exactly where this would fit for me. How about we say, this will come out when I have the sake nerd friends who want to try something a little different. And by a little, I mean very different and perhaps extreme.
By a little, you mean extremely a lot.
Yes, very seriously. Not a little different. This is a whole lot of different.
Yeah. Well, I would say that I would be unafraid to put this in the back of my sake fridge and let it hang out and age. I would love to experiment with aging this bottle. Let it sit for 6 months, let it sit for a year or longer, because it is high in alcohol, it is high in acidity, and these things are going to, protect the sake as it continues to mature. So I'd be very interested to age this sake as well. What do you think about that?
This style of sake is traditionally extremely aging friendly, so that totally tracks for me.
Extremely.
I didn't even mean to do that. Even when you don't mean to do the puns, Tim finds the puns.
They're just right there.
Right for the picking.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, this was very interesting. And I have to say, again, I have never tasted this before.
Yeah.
Going into today. And it surprised me. I thought that with all these crazy numbers, it was going to be much more outside of my comfort zone, I'll say, than I expected. This is actually pretty tasty. It does need a little something. This is not something I'm just going to be sipping on a Tuesday night on the couch. This is definitely outside of the sipping zone, Tim.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, but I do think that with the right dish and the right company, I think that you have some people who are really going to get a kick out of how interesting and different this is. You'll have a good time.
Yeah, I think so too. I read one tasting note about this sake that said it is liquid rice in a bottle.
I can get down with that.
I thought that was really great. I would, as I said, would love to try and age this sake, continue to drink it over time. And I definitely want to experiment with temperature with this sake as well. If I break it out again, I think I would want to try warming it up and see what that does as the sake matures. But just opens a whole world of possibilities because it's so powerful and so strong in many different factors that just is indestructible in that way. So would be really fun to experiment with.
Indestructible. That should be our big takeaway today.
Yes.
And I'm looking forward to some more of these extreme episodes.
Yes. Another one on the horizon for us is extremely low alcohol.
Really?
Which may not be your favorite, John, but we're going to try it.
I honestly haven't experienced too many extremely low alcohol sakes, so that's going to be interesting.
Stay tuned. That's all I can say. All right.
I am excited.
Yeah. Well, I hope you enjoyed our first of many extreme sake adventures to come, and great to taste with you as always, John.
As always, Tim.
And I'd like to thank our listeners as well for tuning in. We really do hope that you're enjoying Sake Revolution. Now, if you would like to show your support for our show, the best way to help us would be to join our community on Patreon. We're a listener-supported show, and if you're able, we would love to have you join our community. And all your support goes to the costs of producing, editing, and hosting the show each and every week.
And if you want to support us on our Patreon, you can go to sakerevolution.com. There's a link there. Or you can go to patreon.com/sakerevolution. We have a bunch of different tiers there. You guys can find the one that suits you best and support your favorite sake podcast. Also, please be sure to subscribe wherever you download your podcasts, be it Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and leave a review. Leaving a review really goes a long way towards getting awareness out there for the show. We love hearing what you guys think about the show. We do read these reviews. On top of all that, though, please tell a friend and have them tell a friend and get them to subscribe. And it really does, again, help drive that needle.
And as always, if you would like to learn more about any of the topics or any of the sakes we talked about in today's episode, be sure to visit our website, sakerevolution.com. And there you can check out our detailed show notes.
And if you have a sake question that you need answered, if you have an extreme sake that we might have missed, we want to hear from you. Please reach out to us. The email address is feedback@sakerevolution.com. So, until next time, please remember to keep drinking sake and kanpai. Extreme.